Welcome to my tutorial of Zero Wing for the arcade. And this version of the game is much harder than the Genesis game that I went through recently on the channel, which I also have a tutorial up on. This is the 1P ROM. In this ROM, it's checkpoint to checkpoint, meaning that if you die, you get penalized, sent back to the last checkpoint of the stage you got to. There's usually a few checkpoints in each stage, and you have unlimited continues. There is another version of the ROM that's pretty much you start right where you died. Which means that you have to make your own challenge. You know, you can limit your credits if you want to make it harder, or something like that. But for me, I like to be penalized when I die. I like to be sent back, you know, so that there's some kind of challenge to overcome. So this game is way, way harder than the Genesis version, which was challenging near the end. The Genesis version, the last two stages were very, very hard, but the rest of the game really wasn't that hard, so it was really unbalanced. While this game is still unbalanced in difficulty, it's a lot more consistent, and there's a lot of hard parts throughout the entire game, basically. So, but the hard parts in this game are much harder than the hard parts in the Genesis version because there's a lot more enemies, a lot more bullets, and I'm pretty sure everything moves faster too. But it's just much harder based on how many hours some of the parts took me. The final boss took me over 2 hours, but I was playing in a state where I couldn't beat the final boss. I didn't realize that I needed a 30 hertz firing rate on my turbo controller to beat the game. So that's my warning. That's why in the title I put it in exclamation marks to kind of highlight that you're going to need that. If you're trying to beat the game checkpoint to checkpoint, then you need to have a 30 hertz firing rate. If you don't have a controller that can do that, or if you can't set that in Shmup MAME, I think it's called Shmup MAME. Apparently you can set 30 hertz on the buttons. The player Peg actually gave me feedback, a 1cc runner of this game, no continues used. And without that person's feedback, I probably wouldn't have beat the game. I would have had to set it on easy because it was impossible. I was using save and load states to practice each little section of the final boss. So I didn't have to start over, and I still couldn't beat it even with that because the fire rate just wasn't high enough. And I'm going to show you what happens at the end of the video. I'm going to show a little bonus footage that shows what happens if your fire rate is incorrect. And I'm going to show what happens when you do get the correct fire rate, how you know that you got it correct. And I will show a little bit about how I save state practice the boss. So that's all going to be at the end of the video. So basically, I had to test about 4 controllers before I happened to find one that works. I have a lot of controllers, so I was testing my turbo controllers that have the turbo feature. The 8-bit Do M30 was too slow. The RAP 4 Hori modded joystick, too slow. That goes up to 24 hertz. It has a switch for 24 hertz. That was too slow. So I needed to use a Retroflag 6-button Genesis controller is what ended up working. Now, if you don't have all these controllers, and you don't feel like testing a bunch of controllers, you can either get that Retroflag controller that I mentioned. It's a $16 controller. Just ask me about it. I'll give you information on it. You can get that, or you can install Shmup MAME, like Shoot 'em Up MAME, and that apparently has a 30 hertz turbo setting you can set in the emulator itself. I did not have that version of MAME set up, so I just had to start fucking around with all my controllers. I tried the ASCII Super Nintendo pad. That was not fast enough. So I just found a random controller that happened to work, so I got lucky with that. Otherwise, I would have had to install a different version of MAME or buy more controllers. Now, there's a few turbo controllers that I own that I may not have gotten around to testing. Now, you're going to see 3 fire rates in this playthrough. You're going to see, before I went to 24 hertz turbo fire rate, right now I have a slower fire rate at this point in the game because I didn't know it was that important. So when I started off, I was playing with a lower fire rate on my turbo button, which I recommend having a turbo button for the game. Otherwise, you're going to be mashing and you're going to be firing slow, even if you mash. So if you're going to do it manually by mashing, you know, don't even try to beat the fucking game unless you're going to be carrying over the checkpoint, your power-ups from previous checkpoints, because you're not going to be able to do it. I couldn't even do it with 24 hertz turbo. It wasn't even good enough to beat it. So you're definitely not going to do it going in fucking bareback, you know. Don't even fucking try. But yeah, so right now at this point in the game, I still have like a pretty slow fire rate. I didn't realize how slow it was until I upgraded to 24 hertz on my Hori RAP 4 modded stick, once I switched over to that, I was like, oh shit, that's a nice fire rate. I was killing shit a little faster. Little did I know that I was going to need 30 hertz fire rate to beat the final boss. So, lesson learned is that, I could have been playing this whole game with 30 hertz from the beginning, and I wouldn't have had to go through 3 different speeds of turbo. So, had I started at 30 hertz, I probably would have been able to beat bosses a lot faster, and the game would have been overall probably a lot easier than it was. I'm sure it's still going to be very hard, but it took me around 7 hours and 25 minutes to beat. I probably would have shaved a few hours off of that, especially because I spent over 2 hours on the final boss not knowing I didn't have the correct fire rate, which I am going to show at the end of the video. So for this guy, this is the first boss. For this guy, you just want to kind of make micro movements and stay kind of in the middle and just got to react well and kind of make micro movements to dodge all this stuff. This is still the easy part of the game, but it is a little bit dense there and a little aggressive. But things are definitely going to escalate pretty quickly. So yeah, with that said, you're going to see me dancing around with these bosses probably longer than you will. If you take my advice, which I say don't just skip over my advice. Take it seriously and get a 30 hertz controller or a 30 hertz setting on your Shmup MAME. Either way. Now, if you don't know if you have a controller that's fast enough, that's what I'm going to explain at the end of the video. I'm going to show how you can test it using save states, obviously, to load the sections of the boss again and again. And you'll be able to test it that way. Now, I was using a foot pedal to load states and save states. I got 2 different foot pedals, one for saving, one for loading, which means I can make really fast saves and loads without even touching the keyboard, which is a great tool, especially for practicing section by section in these brutal games, But I always beat all these games legit. I don't use save states to cheat. I use it for quick resetting if I die, or I use it to practice specific sections, basically. That's about it. So now we'll get into the game a little bit. There's a weird mechanic in this game, same as the Genesis one. Actually, this game is very similar to the Genesis one. It's just consistently way harder. But the layouts are similar if you've played that version. But whenever you see multiple power-ups, you always want to grab the red one first. I don't know why they did it this way, but grabbing the red one gives you these 2 pods. You see how I got these 2 pods, one above and one below me? That's going to triple your fire rate, obviously. So that's going to be fucking huge. So you always want to get the red one first. If you don't get the red one first, let's say you grab the blue one first and then the red one, for some reason the pods won't appear. It's really fucking weird. I don't even know what it does if you grab them in the wrong order. It seems like it doesn't even do anything. So always grab the red ones first. Most of the time you're going to want to grab the red one first. And then grab the blue or the green. I'm never going to advise that you use just the red power-up with the regular shot, the pea shooter, because it doesn't seem to ever even get that strong. Even if you power it up several times, it just seems like shit. So, actually, if I could go back, I might even recommend not using the laser like I'm doing here. But remember, I didn't have my fire rate dialed in, so I was just working with whatever seemed to work. Like I said, start off with a 30 hertz fire rate, and just trust me on that. And then you won't run into the problems that I ran into. It's still going to be a hard game, but you're not going to run into some of the issues I ran into. So one of the best weapons in the game seems to be the green homing shot. So if you can get that and upgrade it, that seems to be the best that does the most damage when you have your fire rate dialed in. Now, if you don't have your fire rate dialed in properly, then the blue laser may do damage. But it seems like the green homing shot may put out more damage if you have it dialed in correctly. And of course, that fire rate is going to be fine. You don't have to switch fire rate depending on your weapon. Just leave it at 30 and you'll be fine. It shouldn't really make much of a difference with the lasers and shit. I don't think the lasers can fire that fast anyway. It doesn't seem like they really do. So, but the green homing weapon is going to be the way to go. So the way it works is you grab your red power up to get your pods. And then if you grab a green, you're going to get your homing. As you see here, that's the green. I was avoiding it for most of the game, but you'll see me getting it later, especially once I get that fire rate dialed in. So as far as my choice of weapons, experiment. Don't just take what I'm doing as fact here. Try out some different weapons on the bosses. And remember, I didn't have the fire rate dialed in until the end of the game. So keep that in mind and, don't blindly accept what I'm doing here. Try some different things. Because right now I have a pretty slow fire rate on my turbo controller, but I just didn't realize it at this point that it would make that much of a difference, This was the first time I think that I was unable to beat a game due to my turbo fire rate, which is insane for an arcade game. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do this as a human player. You're not going to be able to even do a 24 hertz fire rate. Because even if you mash the button, it seems like it limits how many bullets come out. Yet when you have it set on the controller, you seem to be able to get a higher fire rate. But maybe I'm not mashing correctly. Maybe there's a rhythm you got to mash to or something that I'm not picking up on. But either way, it seems like it would be impossible for a human player to mash that fast without the base, without bringing the right power-ups. Because remember, I'm doing this checkpoint to checkpoint. You're seeing me die here, and you're seeing me restart at the checkpoints with no starting power-ups. The problem with most videos online is that they're all powered up, they're 1cc, or they're cheated runs, right? So the good thing about my videos, and I like I said, I have about 2,000 playthroughs. Now, they're not all arcade. But the good thing about them is that whenever I do arcade playthroughs and any kind of playthrough with unlimited continues, I'm always starting from checkpoints however I had to start at them, whatever was required. If I do well, then maybe I could pass some checkpoints by keeping my power-ups. But in this game, it didn't happen super often. Though I had a really good run towards the end of the game that saved my ass. And that's not going to be too helpful for players looking for tips on those parts, because I was able to keep my power-ups and plow through a few difficult sections. So this is actually a hard boss. This thing is tough. The trick is, this is your first introduction to the homing missiles, which are going to be a pain in your ass throughout the game. So with the homing missiles, the way to deal with them is you stay in place, but then you just start moving up or either down as they're coming at you. And if you move up or down slightly, it throws them off. The other thing you can try to do, like I'm doing, is try to catch them in your pods by moving up and down. If you catch them in your pods, that makes it easier if you can do it well. So while you're trying to catch these things, you got to get fire on the enemy constantly, obviously. And just be aware that it is going to shoot out lasers periodically. So you got to kind of manage that as it's moving around. And it is a pain in the ass. It's not easy. This is not an easy part. And, I'm sure it was made harder by my shitty fire rate. But at least you get to see me dance around with the bosses and fuck around with them a little bit. And you can see the patterns, and you can see that it is doable even with a shitty fire rate. I don't really recommend trying to mash your way through this game, but if you do decide to do that, then you're going to have to beat the few last checkpoints in a row. You're not going to be able to do it from a fresh checkpoint on the final boss. I mean, if I'm wrong, let me know, but I don't see how it would be possible. So yeah, I guess I got a lot of the basics out of the way. There's also speed-ups that you'll see, these little icons that aren't weapon power-ups, and those are speed-ups. And those are actually really important at times. See, because for the last boss to dodge some of his attacks, without the speed-up, I don't even know if you can dodge some of the skulls that it shoots out. But luckily, you're not going to have to worry about dodging for the strategy that I have, but you do have to have that fire rate dialed in properly. Without that, there's no way to beat the boss. Now, you also have, aside from your regular firing, you have a wave that comes out of the front of your ship. Now, you don't want to set that button to turbo if you want to use it, because see, what that allows you to do, when you hold that button down, it'll catch smaller enemies and put them in front of you like a shield. And if you press it again, you can throw the enemy out to damage other enemies. It's actually really useful. I didn't use it much in the Genesis version or at all. But this version is so fucking hard that, yes, I definitely used it in this version. For certain parts, it gave me that extra hit that I could take to the front of my ship while holding it there. So, utilize that if you can. Now, if you're using a Retroflag controller that I just fucking recommended, you're not going to be able to use that feature, unfortunately, because the Retroflag has a shitty feature where it sets 4 of the face buttons to turbo, so it's going to fuck that up. So what you're going to have to do, if you use that controller, you have to map another button, maybe one of the triggers or something you could map to that wave move, and then it shouldn't get in the way. But the thing is, if you have rapid fire set on that button that shoots out the wave, it won't work. It'll just keep sputtering and it won't grab anything. So you got to have that one mapped to just a regular button that you can hold down. See how I just grabbed that thing? You can't have that on rapid, though. It will not work. So yeah, luckily I'm not going to be able to describe a lot of the movements because it's so specific, this routing. This is an old arcade game, and it's all about finding the path and where to move, when to move, and all that kind of shit. So that's what you're looking for when you watch my video. You're looking for the exact movement if you're having trouble. Now, this is kind of a safe spot, a semi-safe spot. See where I'm hanging out? These enemies really can't do much to you when you're here. So this is what I used in the Genesis version, and this safe spot carried over to this version. Otherwise, these guys are tough. The diagonal shots are hard to predict when you have 3 of these things going fucking mental over here. So, yeah, but just stay in this spot and keep shooting, and you'll take these guys out. Another good thing about this game that will work to your advantage is occasionally, for the mini-bosses, you don't always have to kill them. If you can survive long enough, you can activate the next checkpoint sometimes. So there's going to be times when you see I just die on the mini-boss, or the mini-boss explodes right when I die, and I still get credit for it. So sometimes that will work to your favor. The homing shot is really good even for dealing with regular enemies. I wasn't really getting it at this point in the game. But experiment with it because it takes out regular enemies a lot better than these lasers do. So it'll probably make it so that you don't have to do all this crazy dodging shit that I've been doing. But if you do decide to use the weapons that I'm using, you get an idea of the pathing and how you're going to have to like route everything to get through these sections. And I say this in every fucking video, but I highly recommend using save and load state practice on an emulator. If you're on MAME, then you got that built in, so why not fucking use it, you know? Most people are playing this on MAME anyway, so just fucking use the save state. Don't fuck around without saves, because the final boss especially, you want to practice it in segments. You want to make sure you have each segment of it down and then put it all together. So just practice it. You know, you play it for a little bit, get a little farther into the fight, make a save, play it some more, try to get a little farther, make some more saves, and just save state the whole boss until you at least save state the whole thing and know what you got to do. And I'm going to show specifically there's a safe position you have to memorize when to move to a safe spot on the final boss. It's extremely specific. I'm going to try to show how I practice that a little bit and detail how you can practice it and learn it. And I'm also going to go over the fire rate again at the end of the video. I'm going to explain how to test your fire rate on your controllers. Because not everybody's going to have Shmup MAME installed. I didn't have it installed. So your only other option is to get the right controller, or if you have a bunch of controllers like I do, you can just start testing them out. Just start going through them, mapping them to MAME, and just start testing them. It takes a little while, but you know, after spending, I don't know, 7 hours or more on this game, you're probably going to want to complete it. So if you do want to actually beat the fucking game, you can start the whole game over and try to get to the end without dying, so you don't lose your weapons, or you can just get your fire rate proper. So for this guy, you're mainly staying in the middle. You're dodging the spread pattern. This is kind of a basic style of this type of fight. There's more advanced styles later on with a lot more going on. There's really not too much to that mid-boss. So there wasn't much for me to say there. Now for this boss coming up, there's a great fucking safe spot. Otherwise he might actually be tough. I knew about this safe spot because I found it in the Genesis version of the game. So this was what I used in the Genesis version, and some of these safe spots actually carried over to the arcade version. Even though it's a lot denser and more aggressive than that version, there is, it was ported pretty well. So it did retain some of the things that would work. So that was cool to see. I'm sure that saved me some time, having a little bit of knowledge of how the Genesis layout was. And you can see my tutorial, that version there too, on the channel, and you can kind of compare it to this if you want and see how much more aggressive this is. But you really can't notice it that easily. I can't, unless I'm actually playing the game. It's kind of hard to watch a video and compare. But you can if you really look at it carefully and pause and shit. You'll see all the extra enemies and shit. I checked it a little bit. But for this safe spot right here, you just stay here. Right in this area where I'm at. You don't even have to move. I think there's a safe spot where you don't have to move at all. But I was just moving a little bit. Okay, no, this is where I fucked it up. Because see, let me explain the way I edited this. This was before I found the safe spot. I didn't have it dialed in, but I knew it was around there. But I just didn't have it completely locked in. But yeah, the way I have it edited is I show the first death at each new checkpoint, but I edited out all the additional deaths. So if I didn't die, like let's say I got through a few checkpoints without dying, then you're just going to see me cruise through. But if I did die on a checkpoint and have to start the checkpoint fresh with no starting power-ups, then you're going to see that because I show the deaths. I just don't show 7 hours and 25 minutes worth of deaths. You know, I'll only show one death per checkpoint at max. So that's how that's edited. So now we're seeing the successful run. So here I'm just saving. I'm not actually cheating here because I'm just making a save in case I need to practice. But I ended up beating this probably on my second try or so. So I didn't actually need to reload my save. I just made a save in case I didn't find the safe spot. But then I just found it. It was right. I think it was right here. Maybe not. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit lower. You see where it is, though, right? It's like in that neutral spot. It's right between like that line and the brick, kind of. I don't even think you have to move if you know. I just was playing it safe. I didn't want to just stay there. But in the Genesis one, I think I just sat there and didn't even move. But I'm pretty sure you could just sit in that spot if you find that sweet spot and not even move. If you want to be real fucking safe. I don't really trust it, though. You know, a game like this, it's kind of spastic. I'm not really that relaxed when I play this fucking game. You know, but Yeah, so now in the Genesis version, this was the easiest stage in the game. But in this version, it's actually a fairly hard stage. It's definitely not the hardest stage in the game. It's one of the easier stages because it's short and it's not super dense, but even still. The boss is tough, especially because I didn't have my fire rate dialed in properly. So I had to dance with this guy for a while. So for this, there's a positioning trick here coming up soon. I don't think you're going to see it right here because I'm probably going to get a little farther into this checkpoint and then die. Because like I said, I'm going to show how far I got before dying. So you're going to see me kind of advance a bit. There is no checkpoints in this stage, I don't think. If there is, it's right before this. You get to this red ship, this big ship. But I mean, that's the only checkpoint that I'm aware of, unless that's actually the beginning of the stage, which it may be. But for the most part, this stage is pretty much devoid of checkpoints. You have to go from here all the way to the boss without dying. And then the boss is very hard. So this is one of the harder early sections. I thought so. That part was also tough, though, where you had to dodge those homing missiles with those two circular things where the homing missiles appeared. That was a tough boss with those two bosses. But, I mean, this was not easy. So look at the positioning here. See the positioning? Stay up here and just kind of, let these guys kind of pass. That one's going to go straight up, so don't let it go up into you. But that's about it. You can totally bypass that whole section with those blue guys by just staying up at the top, I found. So you're going to be repeating this section a lot, so make it easy for yourself and just stay up there. And you may have to adjust your movement a little bit if that guy goes up. The guy's always going to go up in the same fashion, so just move. So remember, you can grab these little balls for an extra shield, so grab those fucking balls, man, because you're going to be able to take an extra hit. So it is worth grabbing them. I didn't really do any of this shit in the Genesis version. It was a hard game at the end, but it wasn't nearly as crazy as this gets. But this stage was one of the easier ones for this game. It's just the boss. The boss gave me a lot of trouble. I actually ended up using another controller for the boss with a higher fire rate. This is when I shifted and moved up to 24 hertz fire rate. So you may notice my fire rate is faster now, because I actually switched for this boss. I was like, let me see if I got a better fire rate. Let me see what I can do. I pulled out the fucking Hori RAP 4, and that has a switch for 24 hertz, so I maxed that out, and then I tried that, and I noticed it was a lot faster, and the bosses were dying faster, so I think that helped a lot. Otherwise, this guy was taking really long, and I was dying a lot. So 24 hertz was helpful, and it's fine up until the final boss. But once you get to the final boss, you're going to definitely need 30 hertz. So, you could, if you only have 24 hertz available or whatever, you could play up until the final boss. But at that point, you're going to have to figure out how to get a controller that can handle 30. Like I said, that Retroflag will do it. And I can send you a link to that. It's on Amazon. It's a Retroflag 6-button Genesis style controller. And I can give you the specifics. If you're not sure, just ask me. But that's what I ended up using, so I can confirm that controller works. It's an awesome controller too. The D-pad is awesome. It's textured D-pad like the 6-button Genesis controller. It has turbo, really fast turbo. Fastest turbo probably of any of the controllers that I have, which is really nice. The only downside really is that you have to set 4 of the face buttons to turbo. You can't set individual buttons, which is kind of irritating. If you're playing a platformer, it pretty much makes it unplayable unless you map like one of the triggers or something to jump. So this is a very hard stage. When you start dealing with these blue vehicles, it gets tough because, see, now we got 2 of them on screen at the same time. So I believe the idea with this was to just try to survive, just make micro movements and just dodge everything and survive and stay in the back. And I'm using the homing shots. That's the other part of it, because the homing shots will take shit out too. So make sure you got the homing weapon equipped. And, you're just going to kind of try to dodge as long as you can. You got to learn how to dodge this shit for a while. And you're going to see where the checkpoint is. So yeah, this is a very hard part. It's a lot of dodging. It goes on for a while. The one positive thing I can say about this part is that if you survive long enough, you end up getting a checkpoint. So you don't actually have to kill these things. It's more about your travel distance. So after, X amount of time, since it's an auto-scrolling game, after X amount of time, you will be through the section. You'll get your next checkpoint. I think you still have to survive this barrage of bullshit from behind as well to get to the next checkpoint. So it's a lot of shit to deal with. You're going to have to practice that probably. It's not easy at all. It's a very hard dodging part. I mean, it's miniature dodges, small dodges, but it's just tough because there's so much shit being sprayed out. I remember it taking me a while. Now this part, I don't remember if this part was as hard as the one. I think it was harder when there was two of these assholes. One up at the top and bottom. I think that was, so I don't think this part's as bad. I'm just going off memory. I was playing this game over the course of probably weeks and weeks. So not everything is completely fresh. You just want to kind of stay all the way on the corner and then switch sides as he switches sides. You see how I made a transition to the other side? Of course, it didn't work too well there. So we're going to see what checkpoint I ended up at. Now, the reason you see loaded, that's because I died a bunch of times on that checkpoint, and I was just doing quick resets where I would just, instead of waiting for the death screen to go through all the little motions and shit, I get impatient and I just load right away. I make a save right at the beginning of the checkpoint. I'll just insta-load. And the way I do that, I have foot pedals, like I said, something I recently implemented, where I can just hit a foot pedal and loads the state. I can do the same thing to save, too. And I can even set up a tutorial explaining how to set all that up, too. I want to go over some of that shit that I do for putting these games together in a separate video. I've been wanting to do that for a while, but I just haven't decided exactly how I'm going to showcase everything. So see how I switch sides? I go to the left and then I go to the right. I go to the opposing side. Whatever side the blue guy is on, I'm on the opposite side, and I just get in the gaps of the spread shots. And that's how I did that. So this is very fucking easy, this section. You break some walls. Just be aggressive. We're trying to take out the little crawlers, but they're not really doing much. Now you got a little bit of a boss fight here. It's another mini-boss. Now this one is very easy. Now you can get in close like this if you want to get more shots in, but it's dangerous, so I move to the back. If you move to the back, those things won't even hit you. Those rotating things, that's what I noticed. I did that on the Genesis version, and I think it's pretty safe back here. So all you got to worry about is dodging these simple spread patterns, which you've already done by this point a bunch of times. So this should be very, very easy. I may have even beaten this the first time I got to with this boss. I don't remember dying on this boss. Very fucking easy. So it's kind of like a free one. But man, those fucking blue things were pretty frustrating. Those if you die a lot on that, don't get too pissed off, because I was getting fucking pissed off too when I played it. I died a lot on those fucking things. It doesn't look that hard, but it gave me a lot of trouble dodging all those bullets. And I was also originally I was trying to kill those crawler things, those big blue vehicles. I was trying to kill both of them. And that was not the strategy to use. You just want to stay in the back and just dodge and survive until you activate the next checkpoints. So that's what ended up working. So now that I have a higher fire rate especially, I think the homing shot is working pretty well for me. But like I said, I'm not getting the max benefit of this weapon, because I'm still at 24 hertz fire rate on the Hori RAP 4. But I have not made the transition to the 30 hertz yet, which is going to happen at the very final checkpoint of the game when I was forced to do so. I actually started messaging 1cc runners and speedrunners, 1cc runners probably, of this game on YouTube, and only one. There's two people that responded, but one was a high score runner, and he said he never even made it to the final stage. So I guess he was just playing for high score. But the other guy, the other person, Peg, gave me feedback. That was the only other person to give me feedback, and that person said that I needed 30 hertz to do it from a fresh checkpoint. I needed a 30 hertz fire rate. So I was like, okay, shit, now I got to figure out how am I going to get 30 hertz. So I started testing like 4 of my controllers, and I got lucky with the Retroflag. That was the one that worked. The person also told me that I could set up Shmup MAME, which is kind of a pain in the ass, because they got to set up a whole version of MAME, and I'd have to have my friend do that, who sets up all the emulation shit for me. So kind of a hassle. So I was like, let me just try a bunch of fucking controllers. I read that the Super Nintendo controllers had higher, like 30 hertz fire rate, but I tried my ASCII pad that has turbo. That one didn't have it either. So maybe some of the Super Nintendo pads will be good for that, the rapid fire ones. So for this, mainly staying in the back, dodging the bullet patterns, but I'm trying to take out those 4. You see those 4 circular things? 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. I wanted to kill those things first, to give myself a little breathing room. And the worm won't really bother you too much if you stay in the back. So that's what I was mainly doing. So this is a tough stage. The game is getting harder by this point, for sure. the last two stages are the toughest by far and pretty extreme. This stage, it's not... I don't think this stage was too bad, actually, but there were a few tricky parts from what I remember. Yeah, actually, this stage, stage is not as bad as I was thinking. But the hard stage, the really hard stages will be coming up soon. We're getting pretty far into the game by this point. So, with the high fire rate that I've now advised you to have, which I think you should start the game with 30 hertz if you want to save yourself some fucking hassle. The homing weapon will probably be good for this. It might even be easier if you use the homing on these parts, because I think homing is probably good for the whole game now that I reflect on it. Because homing would make it easier to take out the smaller enemies. It homes in on them, so it'll take them out before they can get to you probably. And it's also really good for bosses and shit. So it's just a really good weapon. So, maybe ignore what I'm doing here with the lasers and just go for the homing. And make sure you got that fucking fire rate dialed in correctly though. Don't fuck around, man. But you can also grab a lot of these things and use them as shields in front of your ship. I don't know if you can grab these little crawlers though. But a lot of the enemies can be grabbed for a little extra shield, so don't forget about utilizing that. In the Genesis version, it was like, it was a cool feature, but I was like, I don't really need to do this. But on this version, man, being able to take an extra hit will save you from dying sometimes. So we got a checkpoint here. You can see this is just some pretty basic routing. This is not really a very hard stage overall. It's a lot easier compared to what we're dealing with. But, all the stages in this game are kind of tough. Like, even the first stage is a little tricky. It's not an easy game. But, unlike the Genesis one, if you're experienced with shooters, the whole game is easy until you get to the last two stages, which then spike up and get really, really hard. So it's a weird mix, weird balance on the Genesis version. But I guess this game is better overall as the difficulty is more balanced and there's a lot more density and action going on. But the Genesis is a good port. It's a fun shooter either way. But there is bullshit. Like, even the Genesis version, I say the final boss is bullshitty in that version too. It's just way more bullshitty in this one, where you can't even fucking beat it unless you have a 30 hertz fucking controller. Like, you're not going to have that in a fucking arcade, So basically the game is going to take your money and just make you think that you have a chance of beating the game, and you could spend, $100 on it if you want. But little do you know that there's no way you can do it. Especially in the arcade, you don't have save states to test out anything on the boss. You can't test out your methods on the final boss. So, it can make you think that, I'm just going to keep playing, I can get this shit. But you'll never beat it. So, my tutorial is going to save, hours of potential time if anybody watches it, because you need that information. If I would have had that information, I wouldn't have spent over 2 hours on the final boss. Just dying. I spent over 2 hours just dying on it. Not even beating it. Just banging my head against the fucking wall for about 2 hours. So with this, I like to get close and point blank some of the parts out. Like you see me, I'm moving back with the ship. Now that makes it a lot easier now to just deal with the remaining firepower. But this one was tough, because it has these green things that fucking try to home in on you. You see, I kind of stay in the middle to dodge them because they break apart. But see, that one almost got me. It's dangerous. You're going to have to kind of see what works for you, but I think staying in the middle back of the screen was pretty effective for me. But part of my strat was that I had to take out all those turrets, so I had to point blank all those turrets and shit. You saw how I was right up on the ship? I had my nose right up the fucking spaceship's ass. And I did that for a little while until I took out all those parts, and then I moved back. So that's what I advise. Everything I'm doing is pretty much very, very specific, each little movement. So I always say this, but if you're having trouble, try to mimic my movements on those parts, and you save and load state on specific parts to make sure you can get them down. Now, for me, I mainly only use save and load state, I think, on bosses. I don't know if I use them for any level sections. Usually I'll just keep dying, and I'll learn the levels that way most of the time. Most of the time, I can learn levels because I can eventually get it down. It would probably be faster if I use saves to learn the stages, but I don't do that a lot in shooters for whatever reason. Maybe it is something I should do in the future, but the problem with making a lot of saves during the levels is that I may save over a part where the game gave me the next checkpoint, and then when I reload, it's gonna set me ahead at that next checkpoint, And then I got to start the whole game over and cheat back to where I was to get my old save back. So it could be dangerous with rapid saving. Like whenever I do that, I have done that before. I will just start the whole game over and cheat through to get back to whatever checkpoint I was at previously to restore my old save. So it is a big pain in the ass. So I don't do it a lot. But on the bosses, of course, I was making saves on a lot of them. So this boss, you get to start right at this boss pretty much, which is nice. But you see the order in which I'm taking these guys out? That's the order to do it in. I'm doing it very specific yet again. And see, then I go back up here for this big thing. When the big thing comes out, these big fucking things, and I just stay up here. I think there's somewhat of a safe spot up at the very top upper left corner over here. So that's what you see me doing. It's a very specific routine. Now keep in mind, please understand this shit. If you got that 30 fucking hertz firing rate, you know, your strategy, you can probably annihilate these fuckers a lot faster than I did. And if you also have the homing attack available, the homing shot, I don't know if you can get it here, but if you do have it available, it may smoke these fuckers. You know, I don't even know because I didn't use it here. I don't know if I tested it out. I only tested out what was available to me at that checkpoint. So I would have to look again to see if they gave me it. But remember, the boss will leave after a certain amount of time too, I think. At least that one does. So, you know, just do what I did there. Mimic those movements. So this is where the difficulty spikes. This is where the game gets super hard. So, you know, players can get this far. It's reasonable. But this could be a brick wall for many players where players may shut the game off. Because this is where the game really starts to get aggressive. So it's going to get denser, faster. There's going to be tons of shit everywhere. So, again, I recommend following what I'm doing. Very fucking specific. I'll try to highlight what I can as I'm watching this again. But, so here, dying here is okay because you'll get your checkpoint. Of course, you don't want to die at any point in this stage because you'd much rather keep your checkpoints. Oh, your power-ups, obviously. It is not ideal, but this is what it looks like when you do checkpoint to checkpoint. You see I died again. I think I accidentally showed that death, but let's see what happens next. So this is a very hard checkpoint. This one's way more packed than the Genesis version of this checkpoint. Tons of enemies. So here you want to stay down here, take out that crawler, and then kind of clear your way out, move up to this upper left corner here. Take out the next crawler, but just be ready to move up a little bit to dodge the spread shots. Try not to shoot the alien heads as they will break apart and send debris everywhere. Very specific pathing to get down in here. See how I snuck down in here? It was very, very specific how I creeped my way in there. I killed certain things and then I moved, and you got to really watch that. Watch what I'm doing there. Because I can't keep up vocally with the speed at which this game is moving. It's one of the things I struggle with when making these tutorials on these really hard fucking games, is trying to keep up with the action vocally. So now you still don't have a checkpoint. You still got to continue to clear shit out. So you want to take out that plant immediately with those 3 bulbs on it. You want to take it out immediately because it's going to keep firing spread shots at you continuously, which is very hard to deal with. So you want to clear that out, and you got to just dodge everything, you know, the best you can. If not, you're going to be redoing this checkpoint a lot. It's one of the hardest checkpoints in the game. You can also grab the bulbs with the wave that I mentioned earlier, but it's really shitty trying to grab those bulbs because they shoot so fast. So I just stay back. So now if you got this far, you now got the next checkpoint, and this checkpoint is not too bad. I think this is an easy checkpoint. But the next checkpoint is the last checkpoint of the stage, and it's fucking brutal. So, you know, you're not going to be able to relax too much. So I think this boss is pretty easy, if I remember right. Stay back, dodge the spread patterns as usual. I can't remember what else it does, but I remember this being an easy mini-boss. Oh yeah, it's a little tricky because you got these stupid flies that come out. You want to channel your main shot. You know, you want to get a concentrated stream right on these flies to take out as many as you can because they'll just bust right through and kill you. You got to take out like every one of those fucking flies for the most part. So make sure you're clearing them out while you're dodging. It is a little bit hard. It was a little tricky. It gave me some trouble now that I watch it again. But what I did was I used the red shot, the base red pea shooter is what I did. So I used that specific weapon, and I recommend using that for that part because that's what worked for me. I tried lasers, and actually, let's see if the lasers work. I thought I used the red pea shooter. Maybe I upgraded to the laser. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I got the checkpoint. Remember when I mentioned that sometimes the boss the mini-boss will die and you'll still get the checkpoint. That's basically what happened. If you survive long enough, I don't even think the mini-boss has to die. If you can survive this far into the stage, you'll get the checkpoint. So now I think we're seeing another death that I didn't manage to edit out. Unless I was showing part of the checkpoint, but I don't think that might have been a really short checkpoint. So now this is a really important part. This is where this checkpoint is really hard, but I managed to survive far into the final stage actually without dying. So you're going to see me go through all this shit now without dying, which is not going to be good for the tutorial because it's only going to show early parts with the basic checkpoints. Or the basic power-ups. You see I only have basic power-ups now that the game gave me from a fresh checkpoint, but you're going to see me beat the rest of this now without dying. I think I go through several checkpoints now without dying, which I was really trying not to fuck up because I didn't really want to do those parts with no power-ups. So like I said, that's not going to be super helpful for the tutorial. But these tutorials are based on how I beat the game. And, I try to explain what I can based on that. Most of them are not refined. I mean, there's a few where I went back and did no damage of every section, like Ninja Gaiden 3 for NES. But for the most part, most of my tutorials are just me beating the game. So now I'm switching over to the homing shot, you can see. And I'm just dodging for my life because I don't want to fuck it up. There is a checkpoint right before there, but you have to go through all those fucking plants to get to the boss, and it's a huge pain in the fucking ass. So if you do have to do that, good luck. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to use a skill that you use to get this far. You're going to be tested on that part most likely. Luckily, I didn't have to do that because I was able not to die. So now I'm in the upper left corner of the screen with the homing shot, and this is the kind of the safe spot for this guy. Luckily, there is a safe spot for this guy because it's very hard to get to this guy. As you can see, that previous checkpoint area is super fucking dense. So luckily, there is a safe spot here. If you wedge your ship right in this corner. I saw this one on a video. I didn't know about this. So most of the other ones I found on my own, but this one I saw on a video, and it was very good. And that's why I was able to beat this guy the first time I got to it, because I watched the video on the safe spot, and I just did that. So that saved my ass. If I wouldn't have checked that video, that guy is actually really hard. So I probably would have died a lot. But now that you know that, you won't have to die too much on that guy. You might even be able to beat him on your first try. If you have a little bit of a weaker homing shot, it may not be as effective, but I think it'll still work. But I can't confirm that. So now this checkpoint is very hard, but I was able to survive because of my knowledge of the Sega Genesis version. So what you got to do here is keep moving up and down constantly because there's constantly homing missiles. So you got to throw off the homing missiles by moving up and down continuously. So while you're moving up and down non-stop, you have to also manage everything else, which is a challenge. That's what makes it hard. But luckily, this is the checkpoint area around here, I believe. So if you got this far, then you're probably going to get the checkpoint. Or at least it's very close to this part. I think it's when the red ship shows up. So, if you can get this far, the rest isn't hard because the homing missiles stop around this point, which makes it pretty easy to survive. And I think there may be a checkpoint around here somewhere. But that first checkpoint can be very hard. I know it was very hard for me on the Genesis version. But if you keep your power-ups from the previous stage and you move up and down constantly, it does help. But you do have to be kind of familiar with that part. And I was familiar because I died a lot on the Genesis one, and I just used my strats that I used to beat the Genesis game. So that did work in my favor, and that is going to be hard if it's your first time dealing with that, especially since you've only dealt with homing missiles once before on those two bosses. So it's going to be hard dealing with them again in a situation where there's a shit ton of them coming out at once. So for this, I mostly stay up at the top, and then I move down to the bottom here around this part of the stage. Positioning is crucial in these games. Knowing when and where to move, so you just got to find those paths. I mean, the games behave nearly the same each time, so you just got to find your own paths. So now this guy's pretty tough. I think I die here. Yup. You see, this guy's tough because he shoots homing missiles, but he shoots them as streams. So instead of shooting one homing missile, now he's shooting 6 or 7 in a straight stream. That makes it even harder to dodge. So it's just something that you're going to have to be aggressive with dodging. But I'll show you how to do that now. So you want to get the laser. And like I said, man, make sure your fire rate is good. Because the longer you got to fight this guy, the harder it's going to be. Same with all these bosses. Slower fire rate means these boss fights are all going to take longer, like what I was dealing with. And if you have a slower fire rate than this, it's going to take even longer. So, take that seriously. But yeah, so I like to stay in the bottom portion of the screen, not all the way down, but some in the lower portion. And I mostly just move up and down slightly to dodge those streams. Now, while I'm doing that, the reason I'm staying so low is so I can take out those minions. So you see I'm lasering those minions when they appear, because I don't want them shooting out their bullets. So see, I died here, but so did the boss, and I got right to the checkpoint yet again. So that's like the second time at least that's happened. So at least the game does give you a checkpoint if you get far enough into the fight. You probably don't even have to kill that guy. I think you just have to survive until you see that screen transition. See where the screen goes from mechanical to like cave background? So yeah, basically that's what you do. You stay in the bottom area, you take out the minions, and you just got to move up and down to avoid those streams of homing missiles and stay in between the spread shot. So now this is the final checkpoint of the game. So you got to do all this and the final boss in one go. You don't have any more checkpoints. So now this is where you'll be fucked if you don't have a 30 hertz setting on your controller, or a controller that can do 30 hertz fire rate, or you got to set it up in Shmup MAME. You got to set 30 hertz for the button. So if you're not doing that, don't even bother with this shit because you can't win. So for this, it's just memorization of where all the bullets are going to come out. For some of them, I like to run them over with my pods and just kill them with the pods by running the pod over the turret. So you're going to see that. Watch that part carefully and see how I did it. That's the easy part. I mean, it's tricky, but it's the easy part compared to what we're about to deal with. So now I'm at the boss. For the boss, you want to stay. See how I'm lined up with the front of my ship is at the top of the boss. It's right at the top of its body. That's where you line up. You want to line up right where I'm lined up. And what you're doing is moving down slightly to catch the missiles. Now, before I did all this, I immediately took out the laser turret on the front of the ship. So make sure you watch that carefully. You want to take that out. After you take that out, you got some space to maneuver here. So what you want to do is move down slightly to catch these missiles. And just keep doing this. As the ship adjusts its movement, you're adjusting your movement to stay in the same position. You want to stay in line. And you want to be close to the ship like this so you can take everything out faster by jamming in more bullets. So you're using just your homing shot. It's just the base homing shot. But right now you're seeing my fire rate is faster because I shifted up to the 30 megahertz firing rate. So now, after this point in the stage, this is where you got to get down in here and get to this safe spot. And you got to know just how to do this. And I'm going to show it again. But you got to get this down right here, and then the boss will leave. But that part is very specific. So let's go over it a little bit more. We're going to see the ending now, and I'm going to reiterate a few things. I put some extra footage at the end here so I can explain a few things about fire rate again. I want to go over that. I want to show you what's going to happen if you don't have the right fire rate. Now, this is beating the first loop of the game. You get congratulations, all that shit. If you want to get a better ending, I think you got to beat the game like 3 or 4 times or some ridiculous shit, and it probably gets harder each time. I mean, good luck with that shit, but I consider this beating the game. This is the first loop, and you get congratulations. Maybe it's not the good ending or whatever. But it's not like Ghouls and Ghosts where you get a totally fucked ending. I mean, you get a regular enough ending. So see, then it loops. So now I'm going to show you some footage here. This is from my save state practice testing my controllers to find the right fire rate. So if you're in my situation and you need to find what controller can do it, and you don't want to buy the Retroflag, this is what happens when you don't have the right fire rate. See how the skulls are not dying in time and they just rush you and you're just fucking dead? I mean, you only probably saw one example of the skull rushing me so far, but you get the idea. Like, I'm just fucking up the homing missiles. That's my fuck up. But you'll see that you cannot kill the skulls in time. Now, with the proper fire rate and the proper weapon, you don't want to use lasers, but that's what will happen if you're using the homing shot with the wrong fire rate. The same thing will happen. You won't be able to kill those last skulls in time. They'll home into you immediately, kill you, and you won't be able to do shit about it. And you'll be fucked. You'll just be banging your head against the wall. Now, what you want to do here, you want to take out that top weak spot. The top of the ship is the weak spot, that little pointy thing. You want to take that shit out so you can reveal a safe spot for you to move to. So let's watch that again. Now, again, this is with 30 hertz fire rate. See, I can kill the skulls. Now, I'm making saves to practice this, as you see, and I recommend practicing it as such as well. Now, clear this guy out. Now we're going to move into position and get to the safe spot right when that guy dies. Now, you're going to start moving down and staying low to the ship. Move up with it. But see, look, that was wrong. Here's how you got to do it. You got to move down. You got to get it just right. This is something you really got to practice. The first scroll is going to go straight up once you get to the safe spot, but then the other ones move out to the left a little bit. But now you got to start moving down because there's going to be ones that move to the right and try to crush you. See that? You got to move down with it and get right down in that spot. It's very fucking specific. And the only thing I can recommend, you're going to have to practice all that movement and positioning with save states. I think that shows you how many things can go wrong, how precise and specific that part is, and how fucking ridiculous it is. But first thing to know, like I said, you need that 30 hertz fire rate. So you see the difference. When you don't have the fire rate proper, the skulls are going to die. Now, I don't think you should be using the laser anyway like I was, so the laser might not even work even with 30 hertz. Make sure you use the proper weapon and the proper fire rate. You got to have at least 30 hertz, and like I said, that Retroflag controller will do it. The other thing that I was trying to explain is that, that pointy thing that comes up at the top of the boss, on the top of the boss, that's the weak spot that you're trying to destroy. That's what kills the boss. So what you got to do is you got to jam as many homing missiles into that weak spot as you can constantly. You got to be right on its ass, constantly jamming homing shots into it. Because if you don't kill that pointy thing fast enough, you're not going to have enough room to move in there and get into that safe spot to avoid the skulls. What will happen with those skulls is they start coming out super fast, and there's just no way to jam enough bullets. Even with a 30 hertz fire rate, you can't jam enough bullets into them, even if you move back. You won't be able to jam enough bullets into them, and there's pretty much no way to dodge them. I mean, it's like, especially without a speed up, because I don't even have a speed power up on that base checkpoint. That's from a fresh checkpoint start. So the only way to do it that I'm aware of is you have to take out that weak spot fast enough so you can move into that safe spot. And you're going to have to determine when is the time to move to the safe spot. The way you can tell is that the ship kind of starts to move down a bit. And you'll kind of see that happening, but you got to be able to identify that. So you're going to have to practice that with save and load states a lot to be able to identify that exact moment. And then that's going to tell you when to move into the safe spot. And of course, like I said, you have to clear out that spot by taking out that weak thing on the top of the ship. Takes a shit ton of hits, but you got to get that out of there in time. So hopefully that helps. And like I said, the only chance is with save and load state practice heavily, practicing sections of the boss, and having the right fire rate. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.